NEH Horace Goldsmith, Distinguished Teaching Professor of Philosophy from the Corcoran Department of Philosophy.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to have been asked to speak, and I'm grateful to all of you for coming out on this sultry afternoon. When news of President Sullivan's dismissal was made public on June 10th, we were told that the event was the result of philosophical differences between her and the Board of Visitors, or at least certain members thereof. Having a passing interest in philosophy, this explanation piqued my curiosity, and so I was eager to hear more about what those differences were and how they could have led to such a dramatic outcome. I was expecting differences of opinion about whether essence precedes existence, about whether we possess free will in a world governed by physical laws, or about the biological basis of consciousness. Instead, I learned that the differences in question revolved around such issues as the pace at which President Sullivan was effecting change on grounds and the means by which she proposed to do so. For instance, while certain members of the Board of Visitors have expressed breathless enthusiasm for the prospects of online education, President Sullivan has been clear that this area is a highly speculative one in which no distinguished university is, at least thus far, making money. Again, while Rector Dragas has complained in a recent widely distributed letter that the university has not formulated a strategic plan since the year 2002, President Sullivan has remarked that she has been told since her appointment by the Board of Visitors not to formulate such a plan. These are differences, all right, but to call them philosophical suggests that they are too abstract or speculative to merit reasoned discussion, or at least to make possible the hope of a resolution. This would be a mistake. The minutes of the Board of Visitors will surely answer the question what that body has said to President Sullivan about strategic plans. Likewise, a sober assessment of the prospects of online education makes it clear that it's a terribly expensive enterprise that might help promote a university's brand globally, but is a problematic source of tuition revenue. Nothing very philosophical here, alas. This is not to say that there are no differences of approach between certain members of the board and President Sullivan. However, what I resist is the suggestion that to call those differences philosophical is to imply that they are beyond the pale of reasoned discussion. As one of the core disciplines of the humanities, philosophy is devoted above all other things to the giving and asking for reasons, for answers to difficult questions. You're not doing philosophy when you merely assert a grand position. What's instead required is coming to the table with a putative answer to a hard question and giving the best reasons for it that one can. This is what the Board of Visitors has stunningly failed to do. Instead of approaching President Sullivan in the spirit of, hey, we're really worried about some challenges ahead and would like to be convinced that you're doing enough to address them, and then going on to describe those challenges in detail, the board summarily dismissed her. Instead of finding out about the progress that faculty and administrators have made transitioning the university to a so-called responsibility center management approach to fiscal organization, the board appears to have concluded on the basis of little or no evidence that the university is in a business-as-usual mode. This is what Immanuel Kant would have called dogmatic slumber. And pundits from elsewhere in the nation have been reinforcing this refusal to engage. For instance, Ann Neal, president of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, has asserted in a recent Richmond Times Dispatch piece entitled, "Time to Innovate or Die," she writes, "If institutions want to remain viable, trustees are going to have to demand leaders who innovate and think differently. If the president is not moving in a direction that encourages fiscal efficiency and accountability, then the difficult decision to change leadership will have to be made." Unquote. Now, this sounds eminently reasonable to me, but one wonders why Ann Neal thinks that these platitudes would justify firing anyone around here. As I mentioned above, apropos the RCM model, Responsibility Center Management, my colleagues and I have seen more encouragement of fiscal efficiency and accountability in the last 2 years than we had seen for quite some time. Again, Ann Neal writes, I quote, "It bears remembering that those in Charlottesville who are now enraged are the same folks who have for decades resisted cutting costs and providing accountability to the public eye. Sorry, to the public that they serve. While surveys show that the public believes universities can do more and better with less, faculty and administrators simply don't agree, reflexively asserting that quality requires more money. For them, enough is never enough," end of quote. I would imply that I and most of my colleagues can provide excruciating detail about how we spend our time in education, outreach, and the creation of new knowledge. But this is not to deny the imperative to do more and better with less. Higher education is one of the few major industries that have failed to see dramatic improvements in efficiency in the last 50 or so years. The reason is that it's far from clear how we can become more efficient without compromising standards. Education is incredibly labor intensive, and the most obvious ways of economizing on that labor, huge lecture courses, multiple choice exams, and the like, don't hold much promise for maintaining academic excellence. But contrary to what Ann Neal would have one think, we as a faculty are open to ideas as to how this apparent limitation might be addressed. All evidence I have seen suggests that President Sullivan is as well. Here's what I would like to see as a satisfying, perhaps even inspiring outcome of the choices that need to be made in the next few days. The Board of Visitors will, I hope, see the wisdom of reinstating President Sullivan with the expectation that she should at least be given a 5-year run to prove her mettle. As well, those on the board who have concerns about President Sullivan's stewardship of the university will engage in meaningful, patient, and informed dialogue about the very real challenges facing this institution and how they might be addressed. Those dialogues may or may not produce agreement among all parties, but they bid fair to allow each side of the table to discern where the other is coming from and why. That would be a case of philosophical differences. So far, however, some parties to the current dispute have yet to rise above the level of dogma, and I urge them to try some philosophy. Thank you.